and welcome to the inaugural Hay House World Summit. We're excited to have all of you participating in this special event. My name is Greg Sherwood, and I'm very happy to have author and teacher Deepak Chopra with me. As a global leader and pioneer in the field of mind-body medicine, Dr. Deepak Chopra transforms the way the world views physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social wellness. Known as a prolific author in both the fiction and non-fiction categories, Deepak Chopra, welcome to this Hay House World Summit session.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be with you.
And I'm happy that I don't have to read off every one of your best-selling books. We take up the entire hour together. I think you must write a book or two every year. They can't keep up with you.
I do about 3 books a year, yeah.
It's extraordinary. And I know that you're very soon, or just came out, a book with you and your brother talking about your shared experiences in America and the success both of you have enjoyed growing up together in India and then coming to the States.
Yeah, it was a fun book to write.
And the book that I most recently read of yours was another collaboration of yours with Dr. Rudy Tanzi, Harvard professor, specialist in Alzheimer's and sort of world-renowned neuroscientist. The two of you got together and looked at the connection of the brain, and you brought your spiritual and medical experience to Rudy's extraordinary scientific background in the area of neuroscience, and it really was an extraordinary book, and I'm happy to say that the show you did for PBS has become one of the most successful fundraisers in recent times for the network. So we're very proud to have you on the air doing the good work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Now, Deepak, as you know, the job and the charge of this hour, this Hay House World Summit, is to take the best knowledge that you can share within a relatively short period of time, just 1 hour, and give our listeners some insights that you can share with them that you they can leverage into their life effectively, and perhaps get them closer to living a life that is more congruent with how they'd like to feel and be in the world. I know that you are a great champion of all of us being here now in the present, not living in the past, not obsessing on the future, and maybe we could focus on how we can help people get more successful at living in this present moment.
Well, I think we should start off with your mention of my collaboration with Rudy Tanzi, who's not only one of the world's most prominent neuroscientists, but also he's the director of the genetics lab at Mass General Hospital at Harvard Medical School. He's discovered most of the genes for Alzheimer's, and he's a candidate for the Nobel Prize. And the reason I did Superbrain with him was that he was one of those rare scientists who has, as I mentioned, won all these acclaims and has all these credentials, who was open to the idea that we are not our brain. And we met, actually, believe it or not, in the men's room after our talks at TED Med. TED Med is the medical conference of TED. It's similar to TED, but it's only for medical doctors and scientists. And I asked him a very simple question while we were both doing our thing. I said, Rudy, is the brain a verb or a noun? And, he thought about it and he said, it's a verb. So that started our conversation. Because according to spiritual traditions, as we know, nothing stands still. Your body is constantly in dynamic exchange with the elements and forces of the universe. Every cell in your body is simultaneously dying and being born, so that there is universal flux, and we are part of it. And this raises many questions. When scientists study the brain or they study the body, what they're doing is they're taking, in a sense, snapshots of observations, and then they're making, evaluations and judgments about what they observe, frequently not realizing that a snapshot of observation is not the total activity. It's like taking a photo and saying that's you, but obviously you're not your photo. All of science has, until recently, been based on what is called reductionism, and that's how we look at the brain. So if your brain is in activity, what is influencing that activity? And the answer is you are, and you are not your brain. And this is where we picked up our conversation when we started to collaborate on the book. So if your brain is in activity, it's not a noun, it's a verb. And who is orchestrating this activity? It seems you are. How are you doing it? Well, by the way you think, by the way you feel, by the way you imagine, by the way you make choices, by the way you speak, by the way you behave, your personal relationships, your social interactions, your environment, they're all part of the activity. You have to have what we call a brain activity as a result of all the things that I mentioned. Cognition, feelings, moods, emotions, thoughts, relationships, social interactions, environment, and our biology are an integrated activity. So you say, okay, but where's the you that is orchestrating this activity? And that leads us directly into what we're, in a way, going to talk about. What's your real identity? If you think your real identity is your body, well, your body is just recycled earth, water, and air, and it's not the same as it was last year, so which one are you talking about? If you say I'm my mind, then of course most of our thoughts that we have, including most of this conversation, is going to be recycled information. The mind is just a process through which we recycle energy and information between us. And, so the social networks are also our extended mind. So is this conversation. It's our extended mind. And it's recycling through many, many brains and nervous systems, even as our listeners listen to us. So who does it belong to? Is my mind actually my own? Or is it an embodied and relational process that is being recycled through the ecosystem, which is the web of life? So you see, you get into a lot of riddles and conundrums when you ask yourself a simple question like, who am I? What's my brain? And it all boils down to one question, and that is, who am I? And I think we can all say with certainty that I exist. That's the only thing we can be totally 100% certain of. And if I say I exist, then the question immediately is, who is the I that says I exist? What is this feeling that I call I? You have that feeling, I have that feeling, I. Everyone who is listening to this conversation has this feeling, I. It's the most important feeling we have, because everything that we do is because of this I. I want to love, I want to have compassion, I want to be healthy, whatever, I want to be successful. Well, first of all, who's the I and where is the I? And science is faced with a big conundrum with this also, because there's no I that can be found in the brain or the body. There's no location where it says, this is me. Okay, and that's in science, in neuroscience, that's called the hard problem. You can't find you in your body. So whilst the entire New Age movement is fascinated with so-called outer-body experiences, we actually don't have a scientific explanation for an in-body experience. Okay, and when you don't have an explanation for something, then there's a principle in science called Occam's razor, and that says that when there is no explanation, then find the simplest explanation. And the simplest explanation that we can offer, or anybody can offer, for the fact that you can't be found in your body, is that you're not in it. That's a hallucination. And it's a hallucination that we all share, that, I am located somewhere in my body. The wisdom traditions of the world tell us that it's the other way around. Your body is in you, your mind is in you. In fact, the whole universe is in you. And there's a beautiful line from Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, where he tells Arjuna, Prakratim swam vashtbhai vishrajami puna puna. Curving back within myself, I create again and again. And so if I'm not in my body, then the next question is, where the heck am I? And the answer to that seems to be that it's a wrong question, because as soon as you say where, you imply a location to something that has no location in time, because it's eternal and timeless. You imply a location in space to something that has no location in space, that doesn't have volume. It's your spirit. Your spirit, your consciousness is, we would say in today's terms, non-local. It has no location in space or time. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it, weapons cannot shatter it, and fire cannot burn it. It's ancient, it's unborn, it does not die. So that's the starting point, that we are consciousness, that consciousness is non-local, it's eternal, and the body, mind, and everything else that we call the universe are an activity in our own consciousness. If there was an activity outside of consciousness, it would be unknowable by definition. So that's where we start, and then you say, okay, now how can this be useful to me in my life? Well, it can be useful in many ways. The 5 causes of suffering, as explained in the wisdom tradition of Vedanta, are as follows. Number 1, not knowing who you are. Number 2, being attached or addicted to the impermanent, which is a fact of existence. Impermanence is a fact of existence. Number 3, being afraid of the fact of impermanence. Number 4, identifying with a socially induced hallucination called the ego. And number 5, the fear of death. And in fact, all these 5 can be traced to the first one, not knowing who you are. And so, the whole goal of higher states of consciousness or enlightenment is to find your true identity, which is not your body, not your mind, not the world, but the source of it all. And when you do that, then not only have you solved the problem of suffering in general for yourself, but you can help alleviate the suffering of the world, and you can also go beyond the ultimate fear, which is the fear of death, which is in a form the fear of all fears in disguise. Every fear that you have is the fear of the unknown. While the fact is that the known is all that has already happened, so it doesn't exist. The unknown is the place where we live and breathe and move, and yet we are afraid of it. If the unknown could become known to you, then you would have no fear, and that would then give you the ability to harness what are the qualities of your spirit. And these qualities are, of course, infinite love, infinite compassion, empathy, joy, choice, imagination, insight, intuition, creativity. These are the gifts of our spirit. So while most people are looking for this or that, they have lost, as they say in all scriptures, what good does it do a man to gain the whole world but lose his soul? Because the soul is the source of the whole world. So, my life has been dedicated to explaining in terms of the practice of meditation and self-awareness and self-reflection, and also the practices of transcendence, conscious choice-making, knowing the difference between what we see and what actually is. And, I've dealt with this progressively in my books. It was for me, therefore, an opportunity to explain it, albeit simply, in terms of neuroscience, because I think neuroscience is a gateway, but anyone who really understands neuroscience or the brain will tell you, don't look for consciousness in the brain either, because it's not there. Your brain is an instrument through which you orchestrate your consciousness. And you can learn to do it. You can learn to shut off the reptilian brain, which is only involved in survival, and you can use it only when you need it for survival. you can learn how to maximize your limbic brain's abilities, which are emotional well-being, being connected to the world through what are called divine emotions of love, joy, compassion, and equanimity. And you can also learn to use your cortical brain, which is the third part of your brain, which is actually the most recent part, only 4 million years old. The others are hundreds of millions of years old, therefore more primitive. You can learn to harness the abilities or this instrument that we call cortical brain and experience even higher consciousness, which is consciousness of consciousness, which is ultimately answering the questions: who am I? What's the meaning and purpose of my life? What is the meaning of death? Do I have a soul? Does God exist? How do I find the source of imagination or intuition or creativity or my sense of the divine? So, that's what the journey of consciousness entails.
Well, it's a fascinating way to set up a rather, a majestic philosophical and practical issue. And I'm still back to the fundamental question: who am I? And that, you said we're all looking at and listening to this conversation from the point of view of our I-ness, our ego, and yet you're arguing or suggesting that the reality is the thing we call I and the thing that we would refer to as our ego, with its emotions and its anger and its frustration and its ambition, is not who we are.
Right. And even physics acknowledges today that all boundaries are notational. By notational means they are ways of measuring something. So, whether I'm measuring a molecule or I'm saying I'm going to meet you at the corner of 56th and Broadway, these are notations. And what notations do is they create boundaries and they create maps by which life becomes convenient. If I didn't tell you to meet me at the corner of Broadway and 56th in New York City, we might physically never meet. So notations are useful, but what we forget sometimes, that at the most fundamental levels, there are no boundaries in the physical realm. As we go to beyond the quantum realm, then there are no boundaries. So even a subatomic particle becomes a wave of potential, and that at the most fundamental levels, there are no boundaries between your skin and the universe, between you and what you call your mind, or you and what you call your body, or you and what you call your universe. And since there are no boundaries, period, your true self, which is the I, also has no boundaries. It's infinite, it's eternal, it's non-local. It has no existence in space-time. That is, of course, the experience that everybody talks about as the experience of unity consciousness or enlightenment. But there are steps to it. You start with small steps. You get rid of the step between me and you as we perceive ourselves. And that comes through cultivating attitudes like love, compassion, joy, empathy, equanimity. Why are these called divine attitudes? Because they connect you and me and at least start to break down some conceptual and perceptual boundaries. So that is the way of love. Okay, the second way is the way of meditation. Now there are several kinds of meditations. So the second way, the first, by the way, is called the yoga of love. Yoga simply means finding your source, so getting in touch with your source. So the first is called the yoga of love. The second is called the yoga of stillness or meditation, but it's also called the Raj Yoga because it's the royal yoga translated. This comes from learning to quieten your mind and go beyond your internal dialogue or your thought process. And when you do that, you realize that it is thought that is the culprit. Thought is the one that's creating the boundary. There are many techniques for transcendence, as we call it, or Raja Yoga, or deep meditation that allows you to go beyond your thought process, or in the gap between your thoughts. And you can start very simply by simply paying attention to your breath, or by repeating a mantra such as Aham, which simply means I am, mentally, or by asking yourself, who am I, and just letting it go into silence, or by being aware of the sensations in your body, or paying attention sequentially to the five senses: sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell, or by witnessing your mental space, or by being aware of the web of relationship that you are a part of, whether it's your family, your friends, your social interactions, your business colleagues, the city you live in, the ecosystem, the earth, the planetary systems, the solar system, all the way across into the Milky Way galaxy, Andromeda, and all the way to the cosmic horizon, 47 billion light years away. Everything has to be exactly as it is for you and I to have this conversation. So there are many ways, and that's the first I've mentioned. These are different forms of meditation. That's why it takes me 2 hours to get through my meditation every morning. The third way is to actually understand the way things work. It's the yoga of knowledge. The yoga of knowledge simply says, why don't you try and figure it out? There's a lot of knowledge these days on how nature behaves, how nature is an activity, that nothing is there that exists by itself. In fact, there are no parts. What we call the part is a pattern of behavior of the whole. So at our center, we teach what is called systems biology. We don't look at the body as its part, but we look at the so-called part in terms of the behavior of the whole. And then this influences how we eat, how we breathe, how we think, how we feel, everything. Our entire way of being in this world changes to what is called mindful living. And mindful living is just the awareness and the responsibility to choose your experience of life in this very moment. For the eternal now is all you have. So I'll repeat that. Mindful living is just the ability to choose what and how you experience life in this very moment, because the eternal now is all you have. The rest is imagination. It doesn't exist. So, we're not talking about anything esoteric or abstruse, but there are ways to cultivate this mindful living, which I have explored with you in the last few minutes. And there are ways of getting this knowledge through physics, through chemistry, through systems biology, through the new astronomy, which tells us that only 0.01% of the visible universe is atoms or atomic matter, which reflects light or absorbs light or emits light. 70% of the universe is dark energy. We have no way of knowing what it is at the moment. 20%, 25% is dark matter, and the only reason we call it matter is that it bends space-time in the way regular matter does, but it does not reflect or emit light as well. So we have no idea what it is. It may be unknowable because we can only interact with matter that is atomic, the elements of the periodic table. So when you boil down to it, the entire universe, with its stars, galaxies, and all these galactic systems, with billions of stars, and now they say trillions of planets, is actually 0.01% of the universe. The rest is interstellar dust and the unknowable. So when you realize that through science, you are basically immediately struck with astonishment, wonder, humility, and surrender. And that's the way of knowledge as well. The knowledge that actually takes you beyond your ego. And finally, there's what is called karma yoga, which is the way of action, where you do what needs to be done and surrender the results to the unknown, aligning your intentions with the evolving universe. So, people spend their lives doing this, And it's the journey that counts, because it's a very enjoyable journey as you break down your perceptual and conceptual boundaries that we have created through the conditioned mind. And the conditioned mind is the source of all suffering in the world.
Well, this is very interesting. The getting to this last one, the karma yoga. I think most of us live in a world where we could listen to what we just heard you elegantly lay out, which is a path and an understanding of our place in the world and a path towards spending more time in it. It's just thrilling and inspiring to hear, and yet so many of us feel, whether it's struggling with our subconscious mind or our sense of obligation to do this or that, or the regrets and feelings of revenge we have from past encounters with people, or perhaps an unfortunate childhood, or are driven by ambitions to be what we're not right now. Is there a way to really kind of undo that Gorgon knot of ego and sense of and being stuck? And because what you talked about sounds like such a relaxed, open-hearted, loving space, but most of us maybe we've had moments of glimpsing of it, but we seem to spend most of our days in an entirely different space. How do I get out that door?
First of all, realize that that's the cause of all suffering. And that's personal suffering, but it's also the cause of all suffering in the world. War, terrorism, destruction of the ecosystem, extinction of other life forms, risking our own extinction with atomic warfare, or these days information warfare or biological warfare, everything that we call social injustice, poverty, economic injustice, all the issues that we're dealing in the world are the separate conditioned mind playing itself out in collectively. So first you have to be aware that you are the cause of your suffering, and you're also contributing to the suffering of the world. Secondly, I'd like to use Krishnamurti's great advice. He said the highest form of human intelligence is the ability to observe yourself without judging yourself. So that is something anybody can practice. Before you react to somebody, you observe your reaction to react. And if you do that, you won't react in most cases. And if you do, at least the viciousness or the violence of that reactivity will dissipate. So I use what is called the STOP formula, S-T-O-P. S is stop, T is take a few deep breaths, smile everywhere in your body, observe your body, O stands for observe, and now proceed with compassion, kindness, and creativity. And you can do that anytime. Okay, so you learn to be the observer of yourself. But then you extend that. You observe not only your thoughts, and you take it one step at a time. You observe your behavior, your reactivity, your speech, and before you speak, if you just have a little intention that, I'll say only that which is necessary. I'll make sure that it is not violent or hurt anyone, and I'll make sure that it improves the quality of people's life. The only purpose of speech should be to create happiness in the listener. And, if we follow these things, and one step at a time, it's not, you can't be enlightened in a day. It takes a long time for a fruit to ripen, but one day it does fall.
That's fascinating. Now, so that's a wonderful I love that stop process, because that would it's sort of like Rudyard Kipling's that 60 seconds worth of distance run when you're having an emotional reaction to something. Just take a moment, breathe, observe what you're feeling, and that would be a profoundly effective tool if all of us just started to do that and nothing else.
Well, that applies to everything. If you're any impulsive behavior, so if you're impulsive or compulsive in your eating, and that's the problem of your diabetes type 2 and obesity, which will lead to all kinds of other problems in the future, next time you're going to impulsively eat, just stop and take a few deep breaths, feel your body, observe it, and ask yourself, am I hungry? and if physically hungry, that is. You might be emotionally hungry, in which case the food cannot do anything to satisfy your emotional hunger, even if it's a so-called comfort food. So you can apply that to any situation in your life.
Well, that's great. That's wonderful advice. And I think that it really is helpful, this notion of, and I think of you every time I see the bumper sticker in my town, don't believe everything you think, because that seems to point sort of in the same direction you're talking about. I think it appears that we seem to over-identify with our thoughts. How do we break away from that?
Well, first of all, realize that most of your thoughts are not your own, unless you have a really original creative thought like Einstein's E is equal to mc squared. Now that was original, and even that, by the way, wasn't his own. He tapped into a deeper field of intelligence. So first of all, you realize that most of your thoughts are not your own, and most of them are actually these days are by a result of the conditioning we are exposed to every day, through advertising, through media, through it reinforces a false sense of self. And if you realize that your thoughts are not your own, they're basically recycling through your brain at this moment, and that you can learn to actually say next. If you have a thought that's distressing, just say, okay, next, and wait for the next thought to occur. And if you like it, embrace it, or say next again. There's very simple ways of learning to be self-aware. We are aware of everything that's so destructive, and we're not aware of our own self, which is the most creative aspect of the universe.
Well, it's interesting because when you say that, I wonder. I'm a baby boomer. You and I grew up in about the same generational space. And I grew up, and when I was studying in college and studying psychology, Freud still had a huge impact on how people understood the brain and how we live in the world. And the subconscious was a huge thing that we all, mused about and wondered about. What unconscious forces are propelling our activities, making us think what we think, making us do what we do, keeping us from the success or happiness we might otherwise have. Given the radical improvements in our understanding of the brain and our place in the world that have taken place over the last 3 or 4 decades, where do you see the subconscious in your teachings these days?
Well, again, remember, these are words we have invented as human beings. So I like to say that subconscious is the collective conditioning. Your conscious mind is what you're aware of this moment in terms of your sensory experience, and what you're aware of this moment in terms of your thoughts, feelings, emotions, imagination, etc. And then there's the supraconscious, which is beyond your conditioned mind and beyond what you're aware of this moment. The supraconscious is actually, again, a domain of awareness which I would call spiritual, that we all have access to, and it's really where the action is. So where the human body, for example, has 100 trillion cells, which is more than all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Every cell is performing 100,000 activities per second, and every cell knows, not only knows, but knows to correlate its activity with every other cell. Otherwise, your body would fall apart. So who's doing this? What's orchestrating this? How does the human body think thoughts, play a piano, kill germs, remove toxins, and make a baby all at once? Well, there is a deeper intelligence, and that deeper intelligence is the ultimate and supreme genius, which is mirroring, right this moment, the wisdom of the whole universe. And that's what our practice of enlightenment, or our journey to enlightenment, should be, to go into that realm. You have to clean out this conditioned mind. You have to be aware in this moment, but you have to transcend your thought process to tap into your higher consciousness. Again, there's a map for this. There's, in the Vedic tradition, we have what is called sleep awareness, dream awareness, normal waking awareness, soul consciousness, cosmic consciousness, divine consciousness, and unity consciousness, Brahman consciousness, which is enlightenment. And there are biological correlates to this. There are neural correlates to this. Not all the way through, because people haven't even thought of these states of awareness. So we have biological correlates now for what happens in dreams, what happens, which is, by the way, your subconscious mind, what happens in deep sleep, what happens in normal waking state. We also have correlates now in brain for what happens in meditation when you're going towards your soul. But the rest of the higher states of consciousness, as I just outlined for you, do not have biological correlates because, first of all, most people are not aware of the map. Those that are living the lives of hermits or yogis and are not necessarily on this radio show with you. And furthermore, scientists are unaware that these states exist. Okay, so there's a journey to be taken, a big one.
Well, it sounds like it. And just for clarification, you just mentioned the notion of a super consciousness, and you speak of the mind and the soul and the spirit. Is it fair to say, are those different qualities of the same thing, or am I mashing too many things together here?
No, there are different manifestations of the same thing. So both in Ayurveda and Vedanta, you have a physical body, which is matter and energy. We use different terms for it, prana and annamaya kosha. Then you have a subtle body, which is constantly outliving the death of your physical body, even as we speak. It's the body of your mind, intellect, and ego. And it's where you experience or process emotions and thoughts and so-called logic or rationality. And then you have a causal body. The causal body is your individual soul, which is called jiva, which also, by the way, unfortunately, is conditioned by lifetimes of experience. And then beyond the jiva is the Atman, the unconditioned mind, which is one with the universal mind. So there's a journey to be undertaken, from physical to mental to spiritual. We use these terms all the time, body, mind, and spirit. So what is the body? Well, the body is qualities of consciousness within consciousness. What's the mind? Subtle qualities of consciousness within consciousness. And what is the soul? Even subtler, till all the way to the realm of infinite possibilities, infinite creativity, infinite correlation, quantum leaps of evolution, and on and on.
Well, and it's interesting to me because, I mean, obviously you are trained as a Western scientist, and in your recent work with Professor Rudy Tanzi, you sort of, it's an interesting dance that the two of you do. He is, grounded in science. You understand and have that vocabulary as well because you are indeed a scientist as well. But there was nothing that you learned or observed in looking at Dr. Tanzi's work that contradicts your understanding of these higher states of consciousness that science has yet to be able to describe, because either they don't have the tools for them or they're not even looking for them.
I think once we start to look for them, we will have the tools. In fact, I just came back from a conference in India where there were 450 scientists, neuroscientists, physicists, and consciousness experts. The conference was called Toward a Science of Consciousness, and we've kept up with email exchanges with each other, discussing all the different views on consciousness. There are so many views. There's one called realism. There's another one called idealism. There's another one called easy realism, and on and on and on, because there are a lot of scientists today that are looking to find a science of consciousness. What some of them don't realize is that even science is an activity in consciousness. Experiments are designed in consciousness, theories are conceived in consciousness, observations are made in consciousness, and therefore we have to actually stop looking for neurological basis of consciousness and look for how consciousness changes neurology or biology. And a lot of us are there already. So, we're discussing ways to look at this in a scientific manner. In fact, after I left India 2-3 weeks ago, we are 400 people on email right now, exchanging emails and ideas by the hour. So I am very confident that as we move into the future, we'll have a legitimate science of consciousness, but it will not be based on a physicalist ontology, which means it will not be based on the premise that the world is physical, because everything that we're learning is that at its heart, the universe is non-physical. Even the technology we are using right now to speak to each other is based on the premise that the essential nature of the material world is that it's not material. That the essential nature of the physical world is that it's not physical. That the essential stuff of the universe is non-stuff. And we're getting there. It'll happen much faster than we think.
Well, that's exciting. And, it's so amazing to me because you remind me of something you mentioned earlier, that there is no location for the mind. In fact, I remember asking Professor Tanzi himself, what does a memory look like in our brain? And he said, we don't know what memories look like in our brain. So it's something as tangible, seemingly physical and tangible as our mind and or a given memory are really not even things that Western science, physical science, has yet to be able to even grapple with.
Yes,
and
we do not know the cellular basis of memory. We do not know the cellular basis of thought, of anything that we call experience. If I ask you to imagine the color red right now, there's no color red in your brain. Okay, if I ask you to imagine anything, the face of your mother or the house you live in, you have an experience that is called qualia, but there is no image or sound or taste or smell in your brain. All that there is neurochemistry, and we know there's a relationship, but we don't know what it is. And it's time to ask not how do these neurochemicals create those experiences, but how you and your spirit manifests as the neurochemical behavior.
And to me, just knowing those two facts that you just articulated sort of says it's such a new game. It's hard to believe. And I know you take shots from Western scientists and have over the years, although people seem to be coming around to your point of view rather enthusiastically, at least over time.
The only person who used to take those shots was my ego. I don't mind those shots anymore.
Well, but the thing is, it seems that the world is moving in a direction that really celebrates what you've been out in front of the troops over the past 3 or 4 decades, and happily the world is starting to ask the same questions in the same way that you're suggesting they need to be asked if we're ever going to find the answer.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun.
Well, I hope you're having a lot of fun. You always seem like you're having a really good time. And that brings up another point of something that's practical that people can do. You seem to be, and I've read many of your books, not all 70 of them, and I've seen hours and hours, and I've spent hours and hours conversing with you about many of your books over PBS programs over the years. You seem to be a very graceful, happy person. Can all of us hope to get there?
Yeah, I think in our natural state, we are pure joy. That's it. Our natural state is one of joy. And yes, all of us should be there. It's the shortest journey. It's yourself.
and so it isn't, and yet you talked about how it takes a while to learn. You're not going to get enlightened in a day, that you have to essentially unlearn lots of habits of mind that we all have. And yet it's a doable process for even those who aren't brilliant scientists, who didn't have the upbringing you had of living in 2 cultures and having a wonderful family support from your mom and your dad. You had a wonderful complex of things that as you look back on it, go, oh, no wonder Deepak is the wonderfully enlightened person he is. Look at the way his life unfolded. But you don't need to be Deepak Chopra to get there.
No, but I would say you have to be diligent. Diligent means you have to pay attention. So you have to be diligent in self-awareness. Observe yourself, observe yourself, observe yourself without judging yourself. Number one. Number two, take time to be silent and still in meditation. Number three, live the questions. Live the questions. Who am I? What do I want? And how can I have a happier life? Number four, make love a priority. Number five, don't do anything that isn't fun with people who aren't fun, that is not going to give other people the experience of fun. And, just I could list a bunch of other things, but, they're very simple. I can make anyone happy by giving them attention, appreciation, affection. And it's the fastest way for me to feel happy. So, while everybody thinks that, winning the lottery will make them happy, it might for a few months, for a year. But at the end, they return to who they are, their baseline status. So the rules are very simple. Self-awareness, silence, living the questions, making love a priority, never ceasing to have a sense of wonder, and acquiring the knowledge that is available to you, and doing things that are meaningful not only to you, but make a difference in the world. That's it.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's a great game plan. It makes me wonder, though. You live in the world as a graceful, happy, wonderful teacher. Why is the tradition that when we think of, yogis and gurus who are living up on top of mountaintops, or they've become hermits and isolated themselves from the world, even I understand for the Buddha had that choice of just going away from the world, but chose to come back in it. Why do so many of these great teachers tend to disassociate from daily life?
Okay, first of all, these people were luminaries and they were a minority, and these were different times. Today, we live in an information age where, imagine if Jesus Christ had access to PBS or something like that, or Oprah Winfrey. There are a lot of people who have access to the same information. And therefore, what was the knowledge of a privileged few is now the knowledge of a lot of people, and it's rapidly increasing. Number three, in the tradition where yoga blossomed and flowered, there were certain kinds of traditions that were kept alive. So, a healthy life was considered to be 100 years. About ambition, success, and knowledge. The second 25 years was how to take that success and knowledge to improve not only your own standing in your society, but society as well. So you moved into the realm from being just an acquirer of knowledge to a user of knowledge. The third 25 years of your life was devoted to giving back to the world what it gave to you. And the fourth 25 years of knowledge or life, which is 75 to 100, was devoted to enlightenment. And people actually followed these rules.
Wow.
I still have a great grand uncle who's over 100, who's now living in the forest by the Himalayas, following the last phase of his life, which is enlightenment. But we don't have to go back to the ancient traditions. Times change, everything changes, culture changes. We're moving into a global world, global knowledge. There's nothing from making an atomic bomb to seeking enlightenment that's not available in one way or another through the internet or on Wikipedia. At least it gives you a doorway to that. So we're living in different times. I like to think of, what there's a phrase in Christian doctrine, to be in the world and not of it. And I think you can do both, to be immanent and transcendent at the same time.
Well, that, you talk about living in the modern times, which we always live in, and yet you chose recently to experience the life of a monk. You shaved your head, and can you tell people just briefly about that experience? Because I thought that was extraordinary.
Well, I wanted to be in a place where I was not the person who's the authority, to have the experience where somebody younger than me, or abbot or monk in the monastery, was actually somebody that could guide us. And so we shaved our heads, we walked barefoot on the streets and in the forest, to beg for our food. It wasn't called begging, it was called the alms round. We shared our one meal a day. We meditated on impermanence and, in fact, even on our own death. As a result of this experience, the present moment acquired a quality of preciousness that I even had not experienced before. As the monk said when I left to my abbot, he said, the most important time in your life is now. The most important person in your life is the one that you're with now. The most important work that you're doing in your life is what you're doing right now. And if you just remember that, that's the life you want to live, because the now never ends. And, of course I knew that, but it was nice to, in a sense, hear it in a refreshing way and experience it in a refreshing way. When you know the true value of life, then you don't waste it around.
Where did you actually do that, Deepak?
It was a monastery in the north of Thailand, near a place, a forest monastery in the north of Thailand, in a place called Reng Chai. Now, people have heard of Chiang Mai. This is Reng Mai, sorry. That's the name of the nearest town.
Wow, so it just sounds like it's so fascinating that even with all of your experience and all of the thought and wisdom that has gone into your life and the diligence you've applied to becoming who you are, you found that experience even more enlightening and indeed humbling.
Well, Greg, I do that every 3-4 months. I take a week of silence, and I'm going to do that again in May, this time in Asilomar. And there are a bunch of people who go with me for that. And we do exactly what we did in the monastery, except for go begging for our food, similar. And I've done it for years and years. And then, what we do is we leave 2 hours in the evening for dialogue and discussion. And so it's a process I've actually followed all my life. This was a little more exotic and more extreme, and I've wanted to do it for a long time.
Well, it sounded so fascinating, and I love to see I saw some pictures on the web of you in your robes with your shaved head, and it was extraordinary to see. I'm wondering, though, for those of us...
It makes the begging easier because no one knows who you are.
I'm wondering, though, that sounds like some of us think, well, short of doing something like that, I am not going to get on the path that a Deepak Chopra is on. And I really, because I've got a family and a job and a mortgage, I'm not going to go to Thailand, or I'm not even going to go to Asilomar for 2 weeks and sit in silence with Deepak, because I can neither afford it, the time or the money. But these more simple steps that you've suggested throughout this hour are valuable, vital ways to move in that direction.
Yes, they're very valuable, and all they require is diligence. As the Buddha said in his teaching, right perspective, right quality of attention. Right means correct or evolutionary. But one of the things he emphasized in his Eightfold Path was diligence. Diligence to practice. And that doesn't mean you need extra time. It's just a way you shift your priorities. Dan Siegel, who's a neuropsychiatrist at UCLA, he has a very interesting pie that he's created, like a pizza. It divides time into 8 slices. So there's sleep time, there's exercise time, there's meditation time, there's play time, there's relationship time, there is focused work time, and there is what else am I saying? I mentioned sleep, so you can look up the eight slices of the pizza.
But they're not all equal, I take it.
They're not equal because you need 6 to 8 hours of sleep. But if you can spend 15 minutes meditation every day, and at least 15-20 minutes devoting your time to relationship and cultivating meaningful relationship, and then when you're doing your work, you can really focus on your work, then you also realize that even though your subconscious mind or your lower brain can do many things at the same time, your conscious mind cannot multitask. It cannot do it. Okay, so it's a what is called a myth. So do one thing at a time and do it with excellence.
So, and that is the notion of diligence. That sounds fascinating, and probably good advice for all of us, at least in the Western world, where we've all taken, I think, a serious belief in that myth that we can do and have to do. Yeah.
Yeah, you're driving a car, you're gobbling down a sandwich which are just hamburgers and French fries and ketchup. You're driving at the same time. You're talking to the cell phone because now you don't have to have it in your hand, and you get nothing done. You miss your destination. You cross the traffic light. You annoy the person you're talking to because you're not really listening to them, and you get indigestion. So what's the point?
The point is, I think we all believe we have to keep up in some way, and you were making and have made over the course of this last hour, I think, a rather vivid and clear argument to point us in the other direction. And it's interesting that you should say that we can only do one thing at a time, because I understand the scientists, neuroscientists, have studied this very phenomena with students at Stanford and MIT, and indeed, we can't multitask.
Not consciously, no. But your subconscious, your autonomic nervous system is doing lots of things right now. It's regulating your blood pressure, your heart rate. That's the miracle of our existence. There's a part of our mind that does almost infinite things simultaneously, but it's not our conscious mind.
Now, before we have to say goodbye, Deepak, I'm going to ask you to reiterate those 5 steps again, because I think it's very interesting, because you said this is simply, if you were the coach of my life and you were going to give me a simple game plan, because we were never going to have a chance to have a conversation again, this one that started with judgment and silence. Can you just reiterate those 5 or 6 steps again? Because as we say goodbye to our listeners, I want this to be their charge, because I think this is as good a list as anybody's list I've ever heard.
Okay, well, listen, I may have forgotten them, but I'll do my best. Because number one is the highest form of human intelligence is the ability to observe yourself without judging yourself. So practice self-awareness. Practice also mindfulness of your body, mindfulness of the sensations in your body, the thoughts in your mind, the images that you experience, and your emotions. Do one thing at a time. Practice silence and mantra meditation using something like breath awareness, or just repeating something like aham, which means I am. Live a life of questioning. Don't look for the answers, but live the questions, and life will move you into the answers if you live the questions when the time is right. Never forget to ask yourself, who am I? What do I want? What's my purpose? Cultivate relationships and love in every aspect of your life, and pursue excellence, ignoring success. If you do that, life will be much better.
And I love the one that you mentioned earlier. To try to have some fun.
Yes, I mean, I ask myself only 3 questions. Is it fun? Are the people doing this with fun? And is it going to improve other people's life so that they have more fun?
Well, Deepak Chopra, this has been fun and indeed enlightening for me, and I'm sure for other listeners. Thank you for your time, and good luck with everything that you do.
Thank you very much for having me, Greg. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this 2013 Hay House World Summit interview. We hope that you found it inspirational, uplifting, and educational. This is a global event, and we're glad that you could join us as we make the world a little smaller.